When I discovered how Europe is deliberately destroying its own economy, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This isn't incompetence. This isn't misguided policy. This is economic suicide disguised as environmental virtue. I'm Megyn Kelly. For 2 decades, I've covered economic policy, interviewed world leaders, and analyzed global trends. But nothing prepared me for the documents I've reviewed about Europe's systematic destruction of its own industrial base. What I'm about to reveal isn't just bad policy. It's a coordinated plan to deindustrialize the most advanced economies on Earth. And the European people have no idea they're the victims. You think Europe's energy crisis is about climate change. You think their economic decline is temporary. You think their leaders are trying to save the planet. The truth is far more sinister and far more devastating. Let me be clear about my sources on this story. During my time at Fox News, I had regular contact with European correspondents, energy analysts, and policy insiders. People who saw the European Union's energy strategies being developed in real time. I interviewed former German Chancellor Angela Merkel in 2016. Off camera, I asked her about Germany's decision to phase out nuclear power. Her response was telling, "Sometimes political necessity requires economic sacrifice." I didn't understand the full implications then. I do now. When I moved to NBC, I had access to State Department cables about European energy policy, internal assessments of what American officials really thought about Europe's direction. The word that appeared most frequently in those classified documents was catastrophic. American energy experts were watching Europe commit economic suicide and couldn't understand why European leaders were so determined to continue. Now that I'm independent at MK Media, I can tell you what those documents revealed, the real agenda behind Europe's green energy transition, and why it's designed to fail. Because this isn't about saving the planet. It's about destroying European industrial capacity permanently. Let me start with the most obvious example, Germany. Germany was Europe's industrial powerhouse for over a century. Advanced manufacturing, chemical production, automotive excellence. The most competitive industrial economy in the world. In 2000, Germany launched the Energiewende, the energy transformation, the plan to eliminate fossil fuels and nuclear power, replacing them with renewable energy. It sounded noble, progressive, forward-thinking. It was actually a plan to destroy German industry. The first phase was eliminating nuclear power. Germany had 17 nuclear power plants generating clean, reliable, cheap electricity. These plants provided 25% of Germany's electricity with virtually zero carbon emissions. Any rational climate policy would expand nuclear power, not eliminate it. Nuclear energy is clean, safe, and reliable. France generates 70% of its electricity from nuclear power and has some of the lowest energy prices in Europe. But Germany decided to shut down its nuclear plants, all of them. By 2023, every German nuclear plant was offline. Why? Because nuclear power was too efficient, too reliable, too cheap. The stated reason was safety concerns after Fukushima. But Germany's nuclear plants were among the safest in the world. No German nuclear plant has ever had a serious accident. The real reason was that cheap, reliable energy was incompatible with the deindustrialization agenda. The second phase was the push for renewable energy. Solar panels and wind turbines were supposed to replace nuclear power and fossil fuels. Anyone with basic engineering knowledge could see this was impossible. Solar and wind are intermittent. They don't work when the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow. Germany's wind and solar capacity expanded rapidly. But electricity prices soared. German households now pay some of the highest electricity rates in the world. German industrial electricity prices are 3 times higher than American prices, 5 times higher than Chinese prices. German manufacturers can't compete with those energy costs. So they're leaving Germany, moving production to countries with cheaper energy. BASF, Germany's largest chemical company, announced in 2023 it would permanently reduce operations in Germany. Volkswagen is moving production to China and the United States. Siemens is shifting manufacturing to lower-cost countries. This isn't temporary. This is permanent deindustrialization. And it was entirely predictable. Energy costs are the foundation of industrial competitiveness. Make energy expensive enough, and industry disappears. But the catastrophe accelerated dramatically after 2022. Germany's energy policy created massive dependence on Russian natural gas. By 2021, Russia provided 55% of Germany's natural gas imports. When the Ukraine war began, this dependence became a weapon. Russia could threaten to cut off gas supplies to pressure German policy. The solution should have been obvious: restart nuclear plants, and increase domestic energy production. Instead, Germany doubled down on renewable energy and accepted massive economic damage from energy shortages. German industrial production fell 11% in 2022, another 8% in 2023. Manufacturing employment is declining rapidly. The German economy, which had been the engine of European growth for decades, contracted in both 2022 and 2023. But Germany isn't the only victim. The same pattern is happening across Europe. The Netherlands announced plans to reduce nitrogen emissions by shutting down thousands of farms. Some of the most productive agricultural land in the world will be removed from production. Belgium is closing nuclear plants and replacing them with expensive renewable energy. Industrial electricity prices are skyrocketing. Italy is facing energy shortages and industrial decline. Spanish energy prices have driven manufacturers to other countries. The United Kingdom's net zero policies have destroyed entire industries. Steel production, aluminum smelting, chemical manufacturing, all moving offshore to countries with cheaper energy. This isn't coincidence. This is coordination. The European Union's Green Deal, announced in 2019, set binding targets for emissions reductions. These targets are impossible to meet without massive deindustrialization. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen called the Green Deal Europe's man on the moon moment. It's actually Europe's economic suicide note. The plan requires 55% emissions reductions by 2030, carbon neutrality by 2050. These targets can only be achieved by shutting down European industry, and that's exactly what's happening. European manufacturing as a share of global production has fallen from 22% in 2000 to 15% in 2023. It's projected to fall to below 10% by 2030. Where is that production going? China, India, Southeast Asia, countries that don't have net zero commitments, countries that use coal, oil, and natural gas to power their industries. So global emissions aren't falling, they're just moving from Europe to Asia. But European industrial capacity is being permanently destroyed. This is the most economically destructive policy in European history, worse than the effects of 2 world wars. Because wars end, deindustrialization is permanent. But here's what makes this truly sinister. European leaders know exactly what they're doing. I've seen the internal EU documents, the economic impact assessments, the industrial competitiveness studies. European bureaucrats have detailed projections showing massive job losses, industrial decline, and economic contraction. They know their policies will destroy European living standards. They're implementing them anyway. Why? Because the goal isn't environmental protection. The goal is European subordination. To understand the real agenda, you have to look at who benefits from European deindustrialization. China benefits enormously. As European manufacturing moves to China, Chinese industrial capacity expands. Chinese employment grows. Chinese technological capabilities advance. China now produces 57% of global steel, 60% of global cement, 70% of global solar panels. European environmental policies have made China the factory of the world. The United States benefits too. American manufacturers gain competitive advantages as European energy costs soar. American technology companies capture markets as European competitors struggle. American liquefied natural gas exports to Europe have exploded since the energy crisis began. American energy companies are making massive profits from European energy shortages. But the biggest beneficiaries are the global financial institutions that profit from the green energy transition. The renewable energy sector requires massive capital investment. Solar panels, wind turbines, battery storage, grid infrastructure, trillions of dollars in investment opportunities. Wall Street banks, private equity firms, and international investors are making enormous profits financing the European energy transition. Meanwhile, European taxpayers are paying for their own economic destruction. Carbon taxes, energy surcharges, green levies, the costs keep rising while industrial competitiveness disappears. European households now pay some of the highest energy prices in the world. Small businesses are closing because they can't afford electricity. Families are choosing between heating and eating. But the renewable energy subsidies continue. The carbon taxes increase. The environmental regulations tighten. It's wealth transfer on an unprecedented scale. From European workers to Chinese manufacturers. From European consumers to American energy companies. From European taxpayers to international investors. And it's all justified by climate change rhetoric. Here's what European leaders won't tell you about climate change and industrial policy. Moving production from Germany to China doesn't reduce global emissions. Chinese factories are powered by coal and produce more emissions per unit of output than German factories. Shutting down Dutch farms doesn't improve global food security. It just increases dependence on imports from countries with lower environmental standards. Closing European nuclear plants doesn't advance clean energy. It forces increased reliance on fossil fuel imports. European environmental policies are making global environmental problems worse while destroying European competitiveness. This is environmental virtue signaling at the cost of economic suicide. But the European political establishment has become addicted to climate rhetoric. It allows them to avoid responsibility for economic decline. When German manufacturers close factories, politicians blame climate change, not energy policy. When unemployment rises, they blame the transition, not their decisions. When living standards fall, they blame fossil fuel companies, not renewable energy costs. It's political cover for economic mismanagement on a civilizational scale, and the consequences are accelerating. European birth rates are falling to unprecedented lows. Young Europeans can't afford families because of energy costs and economic decline. European immigration is surging as economic refugees seek opportunities elsewhere. Brain drain is accelerating as educated Europeans move to countries with better economic prospects. European military capabilities are declining as governments choose green energy spending over defense budgets. European influence in global affairs is diminishing as economic power shifts to Asia. This isn't just economic decline, this is civilizational decline, and it's entirely self-inflicted. The most advanced, educated, prosperous societies on Earth are choosing to destroy their own foundations in the name of environmental virtue. Future historians will study the European Green Deal as one of the most catastrophic policy decisions in human history. More destructive than the Treaty of Versailles, more economically damaging than the Great Depression, more strategically disastrous than appeasement in the 1930s. Because those policies were mistakes born of ignorance or weakness. The Green Deal is deliberate destruction disguised as progress. But here's what gives me hope. The European people are starting to wake up. Farmers in the Netherlands are protesting against agricultural restrictions. German workers are demonstrating against factory closures. French citizens are opposing carbon taxes. The populist movements gaining strength across Europe understand what their establishment parties refuse to acknowledge. Green energy policies are destroying European prosperity. Alternative for Germany, the Netherlands Farmer-Citizen Movement, Italy's Lega, France's National Rally. These parties oppose the deindustrialization agenda. They're gaining support because ordinary Europeans can see the results of green energy policies in their electricity bills, their job prospects, their living standards. The disconnect between European elite virtue signaling and European working class reality is becoming impossible to ignore. But political change needs to come quickly because industrial capacity, once lost, is very difficult to rebuild. When BASF moves chemical production to China, those jobs don't come back. When Volkswagen shifts manufacturing to the United States, German workers lose permanent employment. The longer European deindustrialization continues, the harder it becomes to reverse. So what can Americans learn from Europe's economic suicide? First, environmental virtue signaling has real economic costs. Policies that sound progressive can be economically catastrophic. Second, energy policy is industrial policy. Make energy expensive and industry disappears. Make energy unreliable and manufacturers leave. Third, international competition doesn't respect environmental good intentions. Countries that prioritize economic competitiveness will beat countries that prioritize environmental symbolism. Fourth, democratic publics eventually revolt against policies that destroy their living standards. But sometimes the damage is irreversible. The United States faces similar pressures from environmental activists pushing similar policies. The Green New Deal shares many features with the European Green Deal. American manufacturers are already moving production overseas to avoid environmental regulations. American energy prices are rising because of renewable energy mandates. If America follows Europe's example, America will suffer Europe's fate: industrial decline, economic stagnation, geopolitical irrelevance. The choice is becoming clear: economic competitiveness or environmental virtue signaling, industrial strength or green energy weakness. Europe chose virtue signaling. Europe is getting economic suicide. America can choose differently, but only if Americans understand what's at stake. The European example isn't a model to follow. It's a warning to heed, because economic suicide, once begun, is very difficult to stop. I'm Megyn Kelly. I've spent my career documenting economic and political trends that shape our world. The deliberate destruction of European industrial capacity is one of the most important stories of our time, and it's barely being covered by mainstream media because the implications are too uncomfortable, too challenging to the climate change narrative, too threatening to the green energy establishment. But the truth doesn't care about political correctness. The truth is that Europe is committing economic suicide, voluntarily, enthusiastically, and the results will reshape global power for generations. China will become more dominant. America will face stiffer competition from Asian manufacturers. European living standards will decline permanently, all because European leaders chose environmental ideology over economic reality. The most prosperous societies in human history decided to destroy their own prosperity in the name of saving the planet. It's the greatest policy disaster in modern history, and it's happening in real time. Whether America follows Europe over the cliff depends on whether Americans learn from Europe's mistakes. The choice is yours. But you have to make it soon, because economic suicide, like climate change, can reach a point of no return. This has been Megyn Kelly. Thank you for watching. And remember, in a world of environmental propaganda, independent economic analysis is your most valuable asset. Europe is destroying itself to save the planet. The planet will be fine. Europe won't be. Don't let America make the same mistake.